think there is an energetic component to a lot of these children, whether the mother's aware of it or not. And, I think this is the concept where I couldn't sleep last night was I was kind of asking the children, what do you want to be expressed? And they were like, we're moving into a time where children that are coming through are conscious, not in the unconscious ways that have been where there's so many broken families and broken homes and children that are neglected or mistreated or even specifically bred to go into, SSP or we're kind of moving out of that era into women or parents, I should say, that are pure of heart and can be the custodians because these are the children coming through that are actually going to change the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Starseed Speak. I am very, very happy to have with me today my friend and I want to say star sister and um, fellow energy intuitive, Alisha Brache. Welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's so lovely to be back here again and to sit with you. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
And hello to
yeah.
everyone watching.
Well, as I've said, you and I work in similar veins. I mean, different but very aligned in our path. I feel in so many things: intuitive soul reader, energy practitioner, ascension, and divine counterpart um, guide that you are. We've traded sessions. We've had clients that have kind of worked with both of us and so on. And I feel today the topic we're going into is so you know poignant for both of us personally, but also to the collective and to certainly people that we know follow both of us. It's the topic of galactic children, which encompasses a variety of things, touches on the topic of human ET hybrids and lots of things related to ascension and the journey of the soul. Um, so this is sort of coming on the heels of and by the way, I feel like you're such a knowledge keeper, a wisdom keeper about those topics related to the kids and the frequency of innocence. That's all connected to. What I was going to say was just my video recently. Um, I posted about my son Blue from Mars hybrid reptilian human hybrid. Kind of prompted this. I put that out in my new memories from the SSP related to that. Go back and watch that that for people who are interested to get the full story on that. That's now out. At least part one of it is out. And for you, I guess the first question would be like, what's your first connection or first remembrance of coming in contact with galactic children in any vein or manner, shape, or form? I know that's
Yeah,
a big question. So go where you need to with that query.
yeah. I obviously in preparation of knowing we were going to sit down and talk about this, I kind of regressed back through the entire journey and wow, like it's been a journey of epic highs and catastrophic lows and everything in between. Um, Honestly, when the experiences first started for me, um, I had no knowledge of this. I had no knowledge of any of this, at least consciously. Once I tapped into it and started walking the path, obviously a lot more came through me in a soul recognition and understanding, which I think is, part and parcel of the ascension, remembering anyway, but there's a lot of amnesia around it. Um, but this kind of ties in and interlinks at least my first contact or introduction to this actually came through like 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
um so I guess even as a young child, like I always knew that there was something really important about my path. I was here for a very special time and it somehow involved partnership with children. Like I just like that was like a really keen aspect of my focus. um and so I was doing holistic counseling at the time. And we did, at the very end of the training, one of the last processes we ever did was we did a progression or someone took us through a process of progression, which for people who don't know, regression, you go back into the
I was
past.
going to say,
Progress,
as a counterpoint to a regression progression.
yeah, yeah. And I had such a vivid vision of me with these children. And I remember coming out of it thinking, they look different. Like I kind of know their mind, but they look a little different. And trying to grapple or make rational sense of it, it was like maybe I'll have a partner who already has children, and maybe there was a lot of kind of playing off, trying to logically work out and understand. So I mean that happened, yeah, 20 years ago. That always stuck in my mind, that vision. And it was especially one of the children that came up and looked straight in my face, and I was like kind of you know it never, like, it was always there in the back of my mind. And obviously life continues on, and it wasn't until um in and around the time of the one of the first major kundalini experiences that I had, I started having incredibly vivid dreams of the same children, or should I say the child. There's one that kind of represents, that comes through as a primary speaker, if you could say.
Yeah.
um, I had a series of very vivid dreams with the same child that I'd seen all those years ago. And she was re-entering my dream. And I had this strong bond with her. And once again, trying to rationalize it, going, she's mine, but she kind of looks different. And I don't know how to place this. And
Yeah.
I got,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was like, maybe I'll adopt a child. I don't know. Like,
He's still
um,
trying to like parse it out in kind of linear terms, right?
yeah, yeah.
As we
I
do,
could
as we do. Yeah.
I couldn't quite place it, but I had a very intensive period around that time that spanned a couple of months, where every night I was having these dreams about these children that would come to me, some more vivid than others, but it was just constant every night. And I wasn't really thinking about becoming a mother at that time. It wasn't really something that was on my radar, but it was very prevalent in my experience.
Yeah.
And I've always been in amongst having majority of my friends being quite intuitive or psychic. That's just how it's been. And I had a number of them kind of approach me separately, and they said to me, are you pregnant? And I was like, no. And they're like, oh, because there's this child around you. And so they were picking it up and perceiving it. So it wasn't just, my own dreams and experiences. And at the time I was teaching, before I started doing this work full time, and I was teaching in the space of mental health. And I had some pretty incredible students in that group that had some pretty incredible, gifts and abilities. And that's probably one of the reasons why, they were kind of put in those categories. And I just remember one of the students approaching me who was very perceptive. And she just whispered to me, like, so the class couldn't hear. She said, are you pregnant? And I was,
Again.
it
Again.
just, I was like,
No, 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 I'm
um,
not. I'm sure I'm not.
but what had happened, or what had transpired the night before, and it wasn't until looking back, I was having a lot of experiences on board craft.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I was having a lot of the interaction with the children, but that wasn't coming through in my mind at that time.
Yeah.
And I remember that morning distinctively waking up, rushing around, getting ready for work. And I was in the bathroom and I looked down and I had these very distinct, like I was bleeding. And I was like, what? And when I looked further, I could see that I had very noticeable incision marks placed on my stomach. And I kind of brushed it off of like, oh, I was brushing around. I must have just, cut myself, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. One of those things that we normally do.
yeah, yeah, in such
Oh
a,
my gosh.
sensitive spot, and it was that day in the classroom that I remember excusing myself because I felt like this twinge or pain that was happening kind of in my womb, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I sort of turned around from the class and I looked down and thought, oh God, it's bleeding again. So I sort of took myself off to the bathroom just to kind of patch it up. And I was very confused, although there was so much happening in my life at the time, I just didn't have the space to kind of put
Mhm.
two and two together. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
it
this is an
wasn't,
incision you're seeing on your belly. Is that correct?
yeah.
Yeah.
In total, I had three, but one quite prominent. It was about that big
Wow.
under the belly button.
Okay. And can I ask the year just for linear minds that want to
Yeah,
know
sure. That
when
was at
was this?
the end of 2015.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd gone through a lot of changes in my life around that time. So
Yeah.
um, I'd ended a long-term relationship. I had moved house several times, because of that. I was at that point in time, I was still working, um, working for someone else. I wasn't working for myself at that stage yet, although I was doing a lot of sessions on the side. And yeah, there was like whole plethora. So I went through a Kundalini activation around that time that kind of built the momentum. And then it was in the December that I started having my first conscious contact with galactic beings. And so once that had happened, then I kind of started to make the association of like, for months now, I've had all these strange anomalies happen where I've been really tired at like strange times and then gone to bed and waken up like 12 hours later, you know, felt quite, you know, frazzled. And so I started to realize that there was something much larger going on that I didn't have all the details of at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Were you,
so
do
yeah.
do I understand that were you making contact with this galactic child at that point, or just beings connected with the kind of context of it in your life, or star family or so? Could you just say a little
Mm.
bit more about that?
I wasn't making like from my side, I wasn't directly linking in and making contact. This child was trying to make contact with me and make her
Okay.
presence known,
Okay.
very strongly. Um, I was a bit confused about it all, and it was later that yeah, I started to have beings um, materialize in my room. Um, a lot of bright lights. I'd wake up in the middle of the night at some points and I would have these huge blue beings that were like pouring energy into my womb and like attuning my frequency.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on at that
That's a
time.
lot for
And
yeah. Yeah.
considering, I mean, I've always been open to this stuff, but I had never had conscious memory at that point or even made any attempts to make contact. It just felt like it kind of got thrust upon me at that point.
Mm.
Um, I
Yeah.
was, at the time in my personal life, I was sort of petering around like soul connection, relationship, starting a new life, starting a business. There was so many other aspects that part was not, you know,
Yeah.
um,
That wasn't at the forefront of your
no, but that's
moment.
what wanted to be at the forefront. Yeah.
Okay, and another kind of linear question for minds that want to know: do you have a sense of who the beings were, the blue light beings, or any? Do you have an affiliation, or can you say a little bit more
Hmm.
about that as well?
Yeah. So at the time, I hadn't done any research on, I was aware of the basic galactic races and more so like the gray. So
Yeah.
I hadn't explored into that, but I had started downloading a healing modality. And I believe that this was based off sort of 10 years of developing it and being led and intuitively guided. But all of a sudden, it was like this whole download of this is how you help people, whole modality kind of got installed into me all at once. And all I kept hearing in repeat over and over every time I did it was, "You're now channeling the Arcturian ray." And I was like, "What's that?" And so
What's
I would
that?
pass
Yeah.
so to answer your question, I've come to know that it's very much a process, and it's part of my soul heritage is very an Arcturian link to that. And the more I've discovered and unpacked and understood this process and journey that I've been on for many years now is very much a reproduction piece that is very Arcturian and not so much human. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, wow. And you know what so I find so beautiful in this is that you really it wasn't like you had gone and researched anything or like you knew anything about what's happening. So much of my journey correlates with being a little bit, like a deer in the headlights, like I have no idea what this is about. But it lends credence to the story when we haven't been kind of steeped in any kind of particular lore or, as I might say, front loaded. So
Yeah,
it's very like there's such a truth to it as you speak in. And would you say this was part of a larger benevolent hybrid program, or that you have
yeah,
been part of that? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
Once, so I can pinpoint a specific date where it all kind of evolved from just having nighttime experiences and intensive dreams to a point where I believe that there was a light conception point that occurred,
Mhm.
um, which was that took place in early January of 2016. And I went to bed. So I had, for that, there was a lot of synchronicity that happened at the time. I won't go into too much detail, but I'd had a dog at the time, Siberian Husky,
Yeah.
who had passed away while I was overseas. And I'd had all this intuitive information that had come to me that her soul was looking to reincarnate and that she had come to me for a certain period of time because she was a fractal of the child that wanted to come through. So it was like an attuning process.
Mhm.
And then once her soul had then moved beyond this physical plane or moved out of dog form, that it was going to, well, an aspect of her frequency, let's say. And so I started the night that it occurred, I was just having so many, um, what I deemed at the time strange thoughts of immaculate conception because I was
Yes.
like, I don't, I don't actually know how this is going to transpire. And there was a sense of like sorry, I've lost the word, but like immediate, like this is going to manifest into the physical realm quite quickly. And I was very overwhelmed by it because it was, yeah. And so there was that exact moment where I woke up. So there was an experience I had that I won't share because it's a little bit too personal, but there was a blending, you could say, or a merging of frequencies with me and another person. And I woke up the very next day just feeling different. I couldn't describe it any other way that there was something happening in my body that I did not understand. And I felt raw and tender in my belly. And so I went back to a few months ago when I'd had the incisions, and all day I kept looking. I was like, there's got to be something there because it felt quite raw and tender as though I may have had some type of surgery.
Mhm.
Um, and at that point, my whole energy frequency had changed.
Yeah.
Um, and at that point, then my body started morphing and showing very visible signs of pregnancy.
Yeah.
Um, so you could say that was a tipping point where everything in my life changed.
And I would think that too, you said this wasn't on the radar, but it probably came to be the centerpiece of your experience in your life at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. And I think everything at that point just dropped away and took a back seat because I was trying to work out and understand how my life just changed so dramatically,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
trajectory of that. But it's interesting, and I will say this, in the lead up to all of that, I was in such a heightened energetic space for a long period of time that my frequency was very, very high. And I just remember being so dialed in to, to source, to consciousness, to the universe. And I kept saying on repeat, bring me my purpose, bring me my mission. I'm ready. It was just like a call that I had kept calling in. I thought it was something quite different.
Okay,
um,
and you're
yeah,
calling it, like little do you know, like this is a big part of
yeah,
purpose. Would you
yeah,
say, looking at it now with your understanding now, was this galactic child, your mission?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I've believed to understand, that that is a huge part of, you know, the role and the reason I'm here is not only to be able to bring these children into the physical plane that helps with the ascension process, but it's also to be able to work with other mothers who are going through similar experiences. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
kind of around a bit, but that first year was absolutely probably one of the worst years of my life, because it was a lot of deprogramming and trying to comprehend a new reality that just didn't make sense. And I was,
Mhm.
um, but towards the end of that year, when I thought, oh, this process is going to go on, like we're out of linear time here. Like there's nothing conventional about it. There's nothing linear about it. And I asked for guidance, and I was like, I kind of had to really pull myself out of this very dark night. Um, and I just simply asked the question of like, what am I meant to do with all of this? And it came through so clearly of, you need to start writing and talking about this, because eventually your work will entail to support many others that will go through this experience. And I think my question was like, why have I had to go through so many experiences? And it was like, you have to go through everything that's possible, to be able to relate to all the different variables that are possible, with bringing these children through. So I
Yeah.
would say that that is pretty accurate.
Very much so. I mean, and that's relevant to, clients I've worked for. I've seen this similar, or with my own journey, like why did I have to sample, let's say, so many pieces of let's say, the darkness and deviance of the SSP iteration that I was in? It's so you can help other people, and you can't do that unless you've experienced it yourself. So, quite poignant. And was this a like traditionally, we're thinking, oh, a 9-month gestation period. What's your perception of, like, how does this correlate, or does it even, or does it not even, is there any
No,
correlation to that?
I
No.
think I drove myself insane for the first, well, especially the first 9 months, because that's all I had to go by. I mean, in the beginning, when my frequency was in a very high um, space, that there was this rapid acceleration and growth that was taking place. So in my mind, I was like, is this something that is accelerated to be quicker than what we've previously known? Because I had
Yeah.
no parameters around this. It was
Right.
like, well, anything goes, right? But what I've learned to understand is it's an attuning of a frequency. So the mother or the carrier has to really be able to hold and embody the frequency of what the child carries to bring that through. And I like, that's a big job. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
towards the end of the 9 month time frame, that was when I started to find other communities of women who were claiming to have longer gestational periods.
Mhm.
Um, it's something that's they call cryptic pregnancy, and I kind of joined some of these support groups and had spoken to a couple of people and found out that some women were sort of in their fifth and sixth year, and I was like beside myself
I
at that
can't
point.
do this for
Like,
5 or 6
I can't
years.
do this. um and so I spend a lot of time in those groups trying to work out like correlation data to find out what was the most common gestation period.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
And there was some interesting data, but there was nothing that, I could speak to because I think there's such a
There's no standard. There's no like
there's no,
one
yeah,
there's no one blueprint for this. And it depends. My impression, just listening to you from sort of an intuitive and psychic lens, is that it depends on the frequency and the soul path of the child, but certainly you as the mother and the carrier, the
yeah. And I think what
bringer
I
of the
found
child.
that I couldn't relate to a lot of those women was that they had very conventional lives. They had conventional partners. They had previously been mothers. For the most part, I'm just generalizing here, but I was like,
Yeah.
no one's got being taken on craft and, like,
Has anybody been taken up into a light ship? Can we talk about that? Like, that didn't happen in your groups. No. Wow. So and as you've been speaking, Alicia, too, the thing that keeps coming up is like, wow, this must have been such an emotional and rather isolating time in your life. I mean, yeah. So just holding some space for that. And it was too, similarly with my son Blue, who I knew nothing of until November of last year. Um, it does. It's so emotional and it's so kind of perplexing and confusing and does take center stage, for a
yeah,
while. And yeah, just pausing
yeah.
there.
I
Yeah,
think there's a reason that I don't often, at least these days, I haven't spoken a lot about this topic.
yeah, yeah. Emotional.
Um, mm,
Yeah,
I think it has obviously it's changed so much in my personal life. A lot of people dropped away. It had the capacity to completely, you know, upend and the lack of understanding, not being able to have anyone that could, or not many, I should say, because I have had beautiful people who have loved and supported me. Um,
yeah,
but just to hold that in in the precious way that it should be, you know, is very own journey, has been. I think nowadays, like it's still a big part of me. It's an extension of me, is how I see it.
mm,
Um, and it still continues to transform my life in ways that I can't even
yeah,
express.
mm,
And the changes that undergo within my physical body still to this day, is just, yeah, it's well, it's life changing, but it's so much
yeah.
more than
And
that.
isn't that when you say it's like, and those words are too small? It's like beyond life
Yeah.
changing. It's like next level. So, and did you have a sense of this? Is it ongoing with the pregnancy, or was there a sense of actually a birthing or the child coming to fruition in some way, whether through
Yeah.
material or non-material reality, or how do you understand that now?
So when I started to research, because I was like, I need to find other women out there. I know that I'm not alone in this. So
Yeah,
I came into the information around hybrid children. And I was like, that's it, that's me. And then I dived into it, I was like, but none of them, from what I could tell, and this is like, none of them had given birth, had been this short stint of like maybe 3 months of having a pregnancy and then sort of disappearing. And I was like, but that's not my experience. I couldn't fit into a box. And that was what was like, I had met other women who had gone through the energetic process of pregnancy and then given birth kind of etherically and then, all the symptoms and the journey kind of took on a different, life form. The way that I understand it for me is that it's a very interdimensional process. So I'll go through periods of time where it's really based off my energy and frequency. Um, I'll go through periods where it feels very physical and other periods where it feels just energetic, and it sort of morphs and changes based on kind of where I'm at in my own process.
yeah,
Um, I've never got to a point that it has ever completely disappeared or gone away. It's always so
Okay.
that kind of told me in itself, well, I'm in for the long haul. Like there's no exit from this until we get to a completion phase. And I know through my intuition, there's very critical key parts that need to come into play. Some I'm in control of, and others I'm not in control of. And so there's many components that kind of these children require so much more than just the average child. And depending on what they're here to bring through, I think is a huge part of the journey that the mother or the parents will go through to be able to come into that level of consciousness and really be ready and prepared.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So I hear you. It's dependent on the frequency, yes, of the parents. And would you say too, also the collective itself? Is it time
thank
for
you.
this being to move into the world yet, or is it a little preemptive, or when is that, as we say, the divine moment? Yeah.
In the beginning, I had had a lot of dreams that I felt were precognitive dreams in a way of reading a particular timeline, but they all correlate with some massive global event of an ascension process,
Okay.
um, like a cosmic flash of light or some sort of stream of frequency that would quite rapidly change the frequency of the planet. And I was always shown in the beginning that these children wouldn't be able to fully anchor in until we had reached that tipping.
Yes. Yes. So much so. Yeah. That's been my impression. Like I work with clients who sometimes have a similar thing going on, and I see that like over and over again. And the galactic children, I mean, I don't know. They started, I didn't, what I was going to say is I didn't know too much about all of this myself. In the past couple of years, there have been galactic children in my psychic vision everywhere. They come through client sessions. Some of them seem like they're thousands of years old, and we might think of a child being young and without an imprint. However, some of them seem to come as very, very old, advanced galactic beings in what we might call more of a child's form or a youth form, or um, that embodiment of innocence in a way. I mean, is that something that makes any sense to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think in some cases, these children are very ancient, they're very wise. And I do get the sense from a lot of them that they haven't inhabited in a physical body before,
Yes.
or at least for a very long time. Or,
Yeah.
and I think at least I can definitively say on my journey, like I've done all that I can to reach a certain level of embodiment, but the environment itself hasn't been conducive to hold um, what would be required. So there's been critical points where I've like, oh, it's happening really soon, and I've got to that point many times, and it's like this kind of highs and lows as I was describing earlier. Um, and yeah, there's just a knowing of yeah, there is these key points that need to sort of come into place that, as I had mentioned before, there's some things in my control. There's some things that are out of my control.
Exactly. And do you, I mean, the golden question here too is, has the child also been in contact with you as this has gone on over time? Do you feel quite a bond there with her?
It comes
Do I
and
feel?
goes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, it feels it's a female child, or do we?
Yeah. So I've had contact with a number of children.
Mhm,
She was the main one
mhm,
and still is. And I've had over time that there's another child that sort of comes in and out of focus, but is kind of behind in terms of maybe a little bit more shy, um, not as confident, or yeah, more trepidation.
mhm.
Um, yeah, so there has generally it comes through my dreams. Sometimes it's a strong telepathic link and knowing, and it ebbs and flows. but it feels like each time we as a collective get to potentially an important tipping point, it's almost as though they come more into physical manifestation, as though they're dipping their toe in to see if there's a
Yeah.
supportive, like if it's a match, and it's like they can hold and come into what I would say a more physical manifestation of them embodiment within
Yeah.
me. And then that may stay for a number of weeks or months or however long, and then it's almost like the frequency drops and I can feel the change and the shift of like, oh, we're out of here. you know but over the years I still have, I would say quite often, well, not quite often as it used to be, but I do get worked on quite a bit on the Arcturian ships in relation to these children. And so at the beginning of last year, I was shown like that there was a level of completion to this process, and I was shown that my DNA had evolved and changed enough to be able to hold and be in compatible alignment. But then I was told that there were some other things that needed to occur, that, as as I mentioned, out of my control. But there was sort of a congratulations of you've been able to. Yeah, it's really updating the DNA strands to hold more frequency of light, to be the vessel.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Brings me to a question. I mean, we have many portals into the cosmos, the human chakra system, the older system, the what I might call the newer ascension system of chakras and energy centers in the human body. Now, what about the, a woman's womb as one such portal at an upgraded and quantum level? Can you speak to that at all?
Mm. So there is a womb chakra or portal that sits
Yeah.
between the sacral and the solar plexus, and it comes through the back, and that is actually where I feel the it.
Good. Glad I asked. It feels so much an important piece of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of the entry exit point that sort of come in and out. And every time it's like their energy or physicality presses in, it puts my body through a lot of rapid transformation too. Like, as I've been told since April this year, I was transforming into what they were calling a diamond frequency body. Now, I've always been told that these children that wish to incarnate through me hold diamond frequency.
Diamond frequency, exactly. Yeah. Well, we're seeing
And
similar things in our,
yeah,
hey,
and so now this process of my body going through this process of being able to match again. So there's been different phases and stages of it. And one of the analogies that has been given to me over the years that I really love to explain this process, because obviously, if you've never come into contact with this concept before, it's very out there. Um, but if you're familiar with different ascended masters or sages that can literally teleport or bilocate or materialize and dematerialize from one place to another, that's what we're dealing with this level of children that are seeking to
yeah.
come through.
Mhm.
So they're already being able to do that process of going through materialize and dematerialize. So it's a very interdimensional
Yeah.
process.
It's so completely quantum that when we first, hear on about this or such a thing, it's like our 3D mind, which is locked in linear concepts and context of these things that like it doesn't make any sense. But we have to kind of move beyond our the 3D limiters, as with so many things, taking a lot of SSP technology and just on and on it goes, that we kind of have to move beyond our construct here in 3D about how things work. So that's a lot to that. And I love what you shared about that, let's say the higher womb portal. And in it, when I work with folks, and I'm sure you've seen this too, sometimes I see in the root chakra, it can be used as a sort of a negative gateway for a lot of darker, lower astral energy to come through and so on. And this is like such a beautiful, um, seems to be a beautiful counterpoint to that, and that we can also be very up leveled gates of light to you know exist at a frequency that allows this to happen. And I would also part of that too, I would say, or maybe that's my question, is you are a willing participant on some level in this. Perhaps it goes to the soul level, the level of the oversoul. Just to clarify for the audience who might be saying, like, I don't want to do this. This isn't part of my journey. Like they,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I struggled with that in the beginning
yeah,
because at the time, just from a basic physical level, it was like my whole life fell apart. I was like, I didn't ask for this. Like, where was my consent in all of this? Like, I really did feel as though I had just been given this excruciating, enormous task that seemed so without any support,
yeah,
or resources at that time. But as I've got on the journey, and further inquiry and understanding, like this was always part of my soul blueprint that I had chosen to come, and it was just the part of like the human cognitive dissonance and getting around that. And when I look back all the way back into my childhood, like I remember having a conversation with my mum when I was about 3 years old, and I said to her, I'm going to have a lot of children and they're going to be all different races. And little things like that. And my mum was like, like, but I think that was my child way of saying, because I believe that the children that are coming through are very mixed genetically,
yes, yeah, yes,
cosmically speaking. There's a lot of DNA tinkering involved, augmenting in the womb potentially that's happening, or upgrading, maybe augmenting is not quite the right terminology, but upgrading in the womb. And throughout my whole teenage year, I would have this repeated uh, dream of having an immaculate conception, you know, um, where I was visibly pregnant, didn't know how it happened, yada, yada, yada. Like, so when I look back, like there were signs all along that was kind of pointing towards this. But yeah, it took a
yeah,
while for my human to get on board, I'll be honest.
yeah, yeah. Um, do the children, how does this all dovetail with what we can understand about, when I think about galactic hybrids, maybe sometimes my understanding is in the realm of like what we call my human DNA, for example, with my son Blue, who was indigenous reptilian from Mars. There's a sort of more of a splicing. Now, would you say the children that are coming through you are pure galactic in nature, or is there a hybridization that goes on then with your DNA, or do you?
Mm.
That's getting a little more
Definitely.
specific. I don't know if that's something you can speak to, or
Yeah, so my understanding is these children are a lot more galactic, yes, but there is quite a bit of DNA aspects that are involved to kind of make them what we would deem godlike, or, ascended master, superhero. They
yeah,
have a lot more switched on than that. When it comes to the visibility of how they look, they are much more human looking, but they have noticeable differences, like their eyes quite piercing, maybe slightly bigger than what ours might be, and just more the difference in their gifts and abilities that they will bring through. It's a little bit different to some of the hybrid programs where they've been
yeah,
mixed with, yeah. But I've always understood that women like myself bringing through these cosmic children, these galactic children, are the link to being able to integrate hybrids onto the planet at some point in time. I've always believed that perhaps not all hybrid children would come, but I do think there is a space in the future where there will be a lot more hybrid children migrated here on Earth. And I think that's a bit of a leap. You can't go from having pregnancy and childbirth as we know it to then these kind of different looking children. There has to be a link. And I do believe that these children coming through, are the link to then open the doorway to have a much more accepting society of having, yeah, different looking hybrid children.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
love the
yeah.
stories where people have known that they have hybrid children, whether they are, synced with sort of reptilian genes, or, they have like all the different looking aspects to them, and they've had visitations of them in physical form. Like I've heard so many
Yeah.
stories where, they have the capability to materialize and be here, but probably not for long. I'm sure they're not really liking the density here on Earth, but
Mhm.
I think that there is a future where that can be a possibility.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, there's so much to this. In bringing me to one of my reckoning places with this is that not all of them seem like they necessarily have to come into form to be activated. Is that also what I'm hearing you say? Yeah, yeah. And almost, that they're activating us, they're up leveling us in so many ways, on the ascended path for us individually and collectively. There's so much of that going on. And it seems more and more that, I mean, I feel like this conversation is timely as well as timeless, in that more of this is happening. There's more opportunity for these things to be happening as the planetary consciousness does seem to be shifting. Belying what we might see on the surface from a day-to-day basis, there is a lot of shift and change. It just seems like it's like,
I will, sorry, I don't want to interrupt,
yeah,
but
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
the children, I think it's what you're saying about being really timely is I had been given or shown months in advance through my children that May would be a pivotal portal point for not just them, but there would be a significant shift in the frequencies that would be more compatible, conducive for more of their type to start to be more prevalent, to make their way through, whether that's through being conceived or
Mhm.
I don't know exactly. That's going to look different for
Yeah. There's so
everyone.
many
But
different iterations of it, it seems to me, just from what I observe, again, working with others and
yeah,
what comes through my psychic vision. Wow. There is also, um, what could we say, speak to around the frequency of innocence, that is sort of like this keynote running through my, like, the unwritten notes about our time here together and the timeliness of it and so on, about bringing us back to something that is alive within us all that maybe we've lost touch with. I mean, is that something that strikes a chord in you?
innocence. Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind as you say that word. I think it heals their frequency pressing in changes so many things.
Mhm.
It I feel like it brings back the innocence back to this planet
Yeah.
in so many different ways. People will obviously my life will be forever changed by this, and I think it's um, when this first occurred, my whole thing was being touched by that frequency and almost denying it or rejecting it or going, why me? This feels like such a sacred process of someone of pure, you know,
Yeah.
innocence, and I don't feel I'm worthy of that.
Oh gosh, this is a powerful point that you're making. Yeah. Yeah. There are. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And I think it's returning back to innocence as a collective. The children have stated to me so many times that their appearance or presence may not physically be birthed until the vast majority of the atrocities that have been done to children through trafficking and sacrifice is
Yeah.
being cleaned up on this planet. It's an incompatible, what they're bringing through and how they're pathing the evolution of humanity is
Mhm.
so contradictory to what has been. So it kind of, when you put it in that context, sorry, this gets me.
Yeah.
When you think about the length of time or linear time that, and I can, like, my human can get really quite impatient and downtrodden by that if I allow myself to go there. But when you think of the enormity of what we're going through on a scale of um, evolution and ascension on this planet, and healing those really dark, dingy, just, it's a big process. And, you know, so I think it's a returning to innocence of all of us that are going to be connected. I don't think anyone who's on the ascending timeline, if you will, I don't know what better way to put it, won't be touched by these children.
Yeah.
They come,
Yeah.
and I don't think that, yeah, you'll be, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a caregiver or a grandparent, like you cannot be not changed into an innocent part of you, you know.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, beautifully stated there. And I thank you for sharing that about the, what's been done to children from for the last couple thousand years and maybe beyond, child sacrifice and these things, and trafficking and SRA. I was speaking to somebody recently in an interview. The topic of that came up: the children that are sacrificed through ritual abuse and so on. And is there a sense that perhaps some of the this is a hard thing to talk about because I need the language to be correct, and I'm lacking the language. I don't want to say that the souls are necessarily volunteering for the position, but yet there's an element of like, we have to clear this out and begin an ending of all of this deviance, depravity, duplicity, and darkness. And are there some that come as volunteers from much higher realms to experience this, and it's almost like a cleansing or a purge? I mean, is that anything that makes sense to you?
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does. And I know that sometimes can be hard to view it from that perspective. But when you take on the soul's perspective, and all the people that I have met, the clients that I've worked with who have been involved in some type of ritual abuse or SRA, or childhood abuse, so I deal with it all, and I would consider them to be some of the most evolved souls I've ever come in contact with, because you can't necessarily be endure something like that and have, um, there's a profound reverence that I hold for people who've gone through atrocities, and being able to heal. And
Yeah, yeah,
I would
yeah,
say definitely there's a part of volunteering to be able to clear that. And I think this came through in the shared session that we had done, or we touched on it, that I think I was trying to track or understand the origins of why, what my role looks like here.
yeah.
Obviously, we're discussing, but I've been so passionate even before all this to clean up
Yes, yeah, clean up the mess of all of this.
clean up the mess,
Children, anyway.
because
Yeah. Mhm.
and I believe that when I track back through my soul lineage, I think very far, you know, back, I had a child that was lost through
Yeah.
incredible sacrifice. Yeah, I think, and I believe it's the same soul. When I talk about the female, it's the same soul. So it's kind of like a bookend, because what she has described to me was she was one of the first that was ever sacrificed in this entire galaxy. It was kind of the beginning of ritual abuse and sacrifice that had taken place and filtered down through. And so I feel like, sorry, this,
No, it's okay. It's a good space for this to come through, I feel. Maybe it needs that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
really wraps up and ends as something cool.
It does. Yeah. So true. Oh, yeah. And just pausing to asking us to inviting us all actually to hold some light around that. It's a tender topic, and it's so pertinent to what's going on, to my history, to yours, both of us in different ways, and the work we're both doing now in the world. And and now speaking to it from the realm of like galactic, interdimensional, and hybrid children, and the restoration of innocence to our whole collective and to our solar system. I mean, that's encompassing so very much. It's like kind of massive, right? Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, and it occurs to me like what a you're talking about volunteer position, which I think you did at so level, Alicia, for this. I think that's a real that's a brave incarnation to take this on, especially when we don't know much about it when it's coming through necessarily. Like my journey with blue, I keep using that. That's my reference point with this. In a way, it's like a bit different, but it's a big ask, you know. Like when the story of him started to come through, he introduced himself to me. Um, I was very undone by it. It was so emotional. It was so you know, a mother's love is one of the most potent forces in this universe. So love itself, you know, regardless of where it's coming from, is so powerful. But it's a lot of it's a big ask for our human selves to assimilate, integrate all of this, you know. So
Did Blue ever, and you may have touched on this already in your video, but the purpose of him reconnecting and coming through, like,
good boy. That's a good ask. You're turning the tables a bit. That's okay. Oh, I feel like there's some things with that have to do with the timing of the collective and why is his story important now. And I've also alchemized so much from that's gone on in the programs that it was a perfect time for him to come in and part of him is asking for help for liberation from the Draco. And it was only at this point that I could do that. There's also the point that I've never had a child, and that's a deep grief for me as I'm in my 50s. The gate's kind of getting closed for that. It's like quote unquote too late in human form, and it's both bittersweet that he's come in to say, hey ma, I'm here, you do have a kid. Can you help me? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So there's some personal reasons why it's timely and some collective reasons, and something
yeah.
I'm still kind of deciphering. Like you with the children that we're speaking of, and myself with Blue, it's almost like this ongoing story that keeps delivering new information and pivot points in perspective and so on. I mean, is that true for you as well?
Ah, so much. Like
So,
I feel like
yeah.
every 6 months a new part gets revealed, and like I've been writing two books about this, and I can't publish them, for various reasons because the story just keeps unraveling.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it. I think I've come to the end point, and it's like, oh no, then um,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, my process is very much governed, I guess you could say, by the Arcturians. Uh, or should I say the higher aspect of me that is Arcturian.
Yeah.
What I have understood from that, their procreation process is through energetic link and vibrational match in partnership that then allows a frequency flow that creates a spark of light that is the conception point. It's very different to how we know it and understand it down here.
Yes. Yeah. 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 I remember
Uh,
we had a conversation too about this, and you said, Rebecca, it doesn't have to be in the standard like human way that this occurs. It's not necessarily correlated to the chronology of human biology, reproductive centers, and
no,
all
and
of that.
I think that's something I'd love to speak to because I know so many women who are of my age and older. So I'm in my early 40s now,
Mhm.
um, who haven't had children yet, but have a deep desire or knowing that there are children in their future, but they can't, logically doesn't like make sense because of whatever reason. What I have been shown, or what these children have shown me, is that as we move forward through the ascension process, there will be many women that have been deemed, you know, barren or whatever word you want to
Yeah.
use, that can't conceive or haven't been able to conceive because they've been waiting for the optimal time for these type of children to come through. So I
Yeah.
think we'll see an influx of a lot more women who are chronologically older,
Yeah.
um, because I think it takes a lot of spiritual growth and wisdom to be able to be a
Oh,
custodian.
beautiful point. Yeah, yeah,
It's
beautifully
not to
done.
say that they won't come through people who are younger than that, absolutely, but I think it takes a lot of preparation. Um, and there are so many different ways. Like I think in all the when I say case studies, all the women that I have been in contact with, so many of them are in their 50s or older, and seemingly quote unquote impossible.
Yeah,
There is there's this whole notion of impossibility around the fact that they are or could ever be pregnant. And I think that's a whole part of the purpose to shift and change the narrative and the
yes,
paradigm.
yes,
I think they're specifically choosing these very unique circumstances where, you know, deemed medically impossible to have these come through. I mean, in the early stages, I had gone to see a doctor and a specialist, and many
mm,
practitioners who had confirmed it, even though, so there was the proof, so to speak, but that was not something I was sort of chasing at the time.
mm,
Um, and so I speak to this from personal experience because I know what is possible, and I've seen it time and time again.
yeah,
And I think we've got exciting times to look forward to because there's not just one conventional way. And I think that a lot of children, even though we have the cap of very, you know, 3D terms around it, um, I think I think there is an energetic component to a lot of these children, whether the mother's aware of it or not. And I think this is the concept where I couldn't sleep last night was I was kind of asking the children, what do you want to be expressed? And they were like, we're moving into a time where children that are coming through are conscious, not in the unconscious ways that have been where there's so many broken families and broken homes and children that are neglected or mistreated or even specifically bred to go into, SSP or we're kind of moving out of that era into women or parents, I should say, that are pure of heart and can be the custodians because these are the children coming through that are actually going to change the world.
beautifully spoken, Alicia. Yeah, thank you. Oh gosh, that's so moving. And just a shout out to the men in the audience. They can
Yeah,
also come through as guides. I see them coming through as guides. I mean, do you see this as well? Like sometimes when we're just able to entertain them at an energetic, etheric, quantum level, they can be transformative. No matter if you feel like you're a female and this is coming through you physically, somatically, or maybe men. I would just want to say, men can also benefit from relationships with these kids and also be fathering these children as well. So, any last riff you'd want to add to that?
absolutely. And I think that's one of the critical pieces is requiring a father figure, or in the case that my children have expressed, like they really want a community of of frequency specific role models. Yes, I think that in my case there is a father figure, but they've expressed and even pinpointed like, oh, that frequency is good. Like I think that there is a huge role that men play, even down to even if it is an energetically conceived or a light conceived child. I break it down into there's the hybrid programs, there's the interdimensional conception, there's the light conception, there's
Yeah.
partnership, there's so many different ways and
Yes. Yeah.
realms. And I talk specifically more to the galactic, but I know there's so many women going through this process that's highly angelic. Like there's so many different facets to it, but the men are crucial in being able to hold the space. And this is not just in the conventional being the provider, this is being a frequency holder. And
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, and I think it takes an incredibly, I want to say the word enlightened man, but one who is prepared to be, go through their initiations and come out the other side as much as I've gone through such an incredible transformation, I would imagine or witness that father figure role having to go through the equivalent, but in their own process to be able to hold that. And really, I think it's about returning to our pure essence as a frequency.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I see in terms of like my galactic heritage that matches with counterpart energy. We haven't even gone into that, but
I
that's a
know
huge
this is like part
component.
two, but I'm like, gosh, there's so many places I'm like, oh, and this question, this question, this question. We'll have to come back to it.
Yeah,
There's so much here, but yes, yeah, we haven't
but
gone into
yeah,
it.
but there's so much component of like bringing everything into a nice cohesion of frequency of like wrapping up our soul's journey and bringing all the integration, the pieces of the puzzle of ourselves, and then being able to bring these children through. And I think the path is, it may look different for men, but it's equally as important. And I really
Yeah.
take my hat off to those men who are supporting the women on these journeys, because it's not for the faint-hearted.
Beautifully said yet again. Such a heart connection. I feel like we are quite surrounded with a lot of loving energy as we brought through this conversation today, Alicia.
Mm,
Wow. And thank you, yeah, just for your tenderheartedness and your presence with it all. It's like I said, it's a big ask, and also for you to bring this forward on my channel. Thank you so much. It's very, there's something so precious, and also, as I've said, that word innocence keeps coming up. Anything more you'd like to, anything else that sparked for you that you want to offer the audience before we?
I would just say to anyone who's watching that if they have been through like an experience, or they have a notion or knowing, believe in that and connect with that. I think that's so important. These children really want to make contact. As I mentioned, for some reason they told me that where are we, May, was going to be a big gateway portal for that.
Yeah.
I've certainly noticed in my experience there's been a lot more consistent contact from my children this month, more so than others.
Hmm.
So there is something that's really important happening around that. So I would take the time. I would say take the time to connect and investigate, and what they have shared with me is a lot of the conventional things that we believe or understand about preparing oneself for child, for pregnancy or childbirth, not necessarily goes out the window, but it's like
Yeah.
the frequency is the most important thing, period.
Hmm.
Like, I know that a lot of couples have struggled and, looked at alternative like IVF and
Yeah.
different ways, but really what they always tell me repeatedly is frequency, alignment, being on your soul path, being in a heart-based connection, that can spark the,
Yeah.
you know, don't give up faith or hope if you are one of those people on those journeys that you deep down know that you have a child that wants to come through, but things may look, on the,
Yeah.
from a 3D vantage point, hopeless. I believe that there's so many of, I get really emotional. There's so many of these children that just want to be able to come through to loving parents. And I think I think of people specifically I know in my life who have tried so hard and been so heartbroken. And I just think what wonderful parents they will make once the opportunity is presented, comes through. But I think a large portion of it is that we haven't fully cleaned up this mess, and the SSP is a huge part of it. There seems to be a massive like interlink between
Hmm.
SSP and these type of pregnancies. There is, we can go into that in a later time, but
Yeah.
that's where my focus at times shifts, because it's like, well, let's get in to do what we need to do to open the pathway for these children. And
Yeah.
I can honestly say that everything that I've done since this whole journey began is because of that ultimate goal of wanting
Hmm.
to yeah.
Oh, Alicia, so beautiful. And you're still offering a monthly support group for women who are going through such a thing as this. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, so that's on my website, under events or soul journeys. It's the 13th of every month. I need to kind of revamp it because I did promise that I will alternate time zones.
Okay.
Haven't yet done that. My life has been chaotic the last few
Yeah.
months, but yes, monthly support groups for people. Um, mean, any spectrum of the journey, just to come and meet and share and
Yeah.
feel supported and held in that space. Because I think,
Yeah.
from what the children have told me repeatedly is that they want to link the mothers together so that when they do come through, there will be these communities that are created all over the world. But,
I love that.
the process can already start right now. So,
Yes, and I have a sense it's a sort of slow, patient alchemy through which all of this occurs. So you are at Cosmic Gateway, is that correct? We'll link
yeah,
you below,
yeah.
and all kinds of wonderful goodness one-on-one with Alisha and in her groups and courses, and yeah, so many things. My gosh. And with myself, of course, you can also book sessions with me, book one with each of us and sort out
I
your
was just
journey.
about to say,
Highly
you've
transformative work. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you've
Coaching
held such
sessions
critical
and
pieces of the puzzle for me when I hit a roadblock or what's this. So yeah,
yeah,
thank
yeah,
you
thank
for your
you.
work
So
and
yeah.
service.
Oh my gosh. You can also find me at this Super Soldier Activation Conference in October and courses, webinars, and so on. You can get on my mailing list. That's also linked below. All kinds of goodness in the links below in the description for both of us. Alisha Brache, you are a gift in my life and also doing a huge service, or we could say a gift for humanity. Thank you. And thank you all for watching today and listening, tuning in, and opening up the portal for all of this to come through.
Just to mention this briefly, I have a mother and father from a previous lifetime, Indigenous mother and father, and I just call them simply mother and father. They've been with me every day for about 2.5 years. They were my parents from a previous lifetime with the Crow people, and they've helped me heal so much. They've done soul retrieval work for me. They helped me journey to get parts back. And that's actually ongoing. Like even today, I was working with them this morning. And their love is so beautifully unconditional.